and welcome to the Fertility Conversations podcast. The goal of this podcast is to create more awareness about infertility and to provide support to people trying to conceive. Thank you for listening today, and we hope you will be encouraged. And now, here is your host, Ola.
Welcome to another episode of Fertility Conversations. Today we're joined by a lovely guest, Nadine Williams. Nadine works with PACT, which is an adoption agency in the UK. She joins us today to educate us on the adoption process and the role that PACT plays in the adoption process in the UK. So welcome, Nadine, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yay, thanks for being here. So we usually start off by saying, tell us a little bit about yourself, as much or as little as you want to say.
Okay, so I'm a qualified social worker. I qualified in 2005 and initially kind of spent 10 years working in safeguarding in the frontline social work teams and also doing therapeutic work with children and families and unaccompanied asylum-seeking minors. I then moved to PACT, where I've worked for 8 years as a senior social worker. And I also do independent work in birth records counselling and also some inter-country adoption work.
Well, okay. And of course, you mentioned that you currently work with PACT now, which is what I wanted to speak about today. So can you tell us, for anyone listening, what PACT is about and what you do?
Yeah, so PACT stands for Parents and Children Together, and we're a voluntary adoption agency founded in the 1900s. So PACT's role is to find, train and prepare and support people from across the South East who want to become parents through adoption. And as a registered charity, we don't hold children within the charity, but we work closely alongside regional adoption agencies and local authorities to place children with our adoptive parents. We specialise in harder to place children, so that would include sibling groups of 2 and 3, older children, which are over the age of 3, children of Black minority ethnic and dual heritage backgrounds, and children with additional needs.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned that part of what PACT does is focuses on children that are hard to place. Which of course, you know, that the older children and children of minority groups. Can you tell us a bit more for anyone listening, how they can support in this aspect, or is there a specific reason why this group of children are harder to place?
They're generally harder to place, I think, because typically adopters, their viewers, prior to kind of doing our training and things, that the younger a child, the easier they are to manage. And this, you know, it can be true in some instances. A baby, the fundamental care of a baby can be easier than an older child. So older children typically wait longer. But in saying that, you know, with a younger child, we're just not aware developmentally of how they may progress. So, for example, a baby that's born withdrawing from drugs that it was exposed to in utero, professionals haven't had time to assess the needs of that child and developmentally and health needs. Whereas an older child, you know, they've had more assessments, they've had more medical assessments. So we're more aware of their needs and their behaviours.
Okay, that's really good to know, because again, like you said, people always assume that the younger a child, the easier it is to adapt them to a new home or family. So thank you for sharing. And for anyone looking to adopt in the UK, can you share some information about the process, maybe just a bit about it? Because I think oftentimes people are not even aware of what needs to be done if they're thinking of adopting a child or children.
Yeah, sure. So the adoption process is split into 2 stages, stage 1 and stage 2. And stage 1 is really adopter-led, so it consists of kind of administrative tasks. For example, we'd ask that you have a medical examination with your GP, and that would be signed off by and reviewed by our medical advisor. You'd also have other checks in stage 1, which include DBS checks, which is police checks, employer references, personal references, those kinds of things. It's typically done over a 2-month period. We aim to get it done within 2 months. And then you'd move on to stage 2, which is the home study. And that's done over a period of 4 months. And that's when the social worker, you should be allocated a social worker in stage 1, which will take you through the whole process. But your social worker in stage 2 will then complete your assessment, which is called your prospective adopters report. And we do that over 5 to 8 sessions, which are up to 2 hours long. And it really kind of looks at all areas of your life, your history, your relationships, your experience of children and childcare. And that really is the report that then gets you approved at our approval panel, and will also be used to link you with children that are available for adoption.
Okay. And this, I mean, from what you said, there's the sections in part 2 and the stage 1 as well. It doesn't sound like such a long time in terms of the whole process, but then oftentimes people still say that the adoption process is quite difficult. Are there reasons, in your opinion, why it might be difficult, or what things people can do to ensure that the process might be as smooth as possible?
Adoption is thought of as a difficult process. In some regards, it needs to be, because we're placing really, really vulnerable children that have come from extremely difficult backgrounds of abuse and neglect. So the assessment is can be quite in depth. Well, it is very in depth, and some people can find that intrusive, but it's only as intrusive as it needs to be. And the reasons for that really are to ensure that we're matching adopters with children that they can, the children that they can meet those needs of. I think in order to make the process easier, there's things that we do. So we'd ask adopters to do homework before the home study, before each kind of session. And that just consists of telling us a bit about themselves, about their experiences, so that it shortens the assessment session, if we've got information prior.
Right.
In terms of kind of stage 1 and speeding that up, it's really about talking to their references and asking them to submit those as early as possible, because we will visit those references and interview them. And we work very much in partnership with our adopters, and we support them through the whole of the process to make it as easy for them as possible.
Right. Thank you. And if you prefer, because sometimes some people that opt to adopt might have been trying to conceive previously, or they might still be trying to conceive and also trying to adopt. Is this a problem if someone is currently trying to conceive, perhaps doing fertility treatments or trying naturally, but also considering adoption? Is that a barrier or something that is not looked at favorably in the whole process?
It is a barrier if they're trying to conceive and adopt at the same time. What we try to avoid is the chances of an adopted child being displaced by the arrival of a new child early in the placement.
Right.
So what we'd ask is that adopters who are trying to conceive complete that fertility journey and then have a 6-month break to process kind of anything that comes up as a result of that treatment, be it fertility treatment or whether they're conceiving naturally. Because what we know about this is that it's often a loss. Being unable to conceive naturally is often a loss for people.
Yes.
And so we recommend counselling following that, just to allow them to process that grief so that they're then emotionally resilient enough to embark on the adoption process.
Right. That's really great that you highlighted the importance of counseling as well, because like you rightly said, the whole process of trying to conceive and not being able to do that or achieve that goal or dream can be quite heartbreaking for people. So it's important that they take enough time and support to be able to get through those emotions and the grief.
Yeah, definitely. We really champion counselling and being as emotionally resilient and resolved as you can be, really.
Right. So if a person is trying to conceive and that didn't work out, or anybody else listening trying to adopt and listening to the fact that PACT exists and can assist them, what is the benefit of using your agency as opposed to someone going to a local authority directly?
So PACT work with local authorities and regional adoption agencies on a national scale. So if you adopt through PACT, it means that we have access to children on a national scale. If you were to adopt through a local authority, you'd only have access to the children that they hold on their records. And
Right.
so adopting through an agency, because we work with local authorities nationally, we have, it also helps to safeguard placements, because of course we're then placing children who live quite a distance away from the local authority that they grew up in, which means they're also living at a distance from birth relatives who could pose a safeguarding risk.
Okay. All right, that's a great advantage, actually, having that access to the entire country. And something else I've actually heard, I'm not sure if it applies in the UK, but here in Nigeria, I've heard people, and I haven't confirmed this, but from talking to friends that wanted to adopt, they mentioned that the sex of the adopter and the child needs to match. So for example, if it's a woman trying to adopt, she can only adopt a girl child and not a boy, and vice versa. Is this the same in the UK or with PACT, or does that not matter?
No, in the UK, that doesn't apply at all. Our aim really is to match children with adopters where those needs can be met. So a singular person can adopt, you can be married and adopt, you can adopt children of a different sex to you, you can adopt
Right.
a children from a variety of age groups. We don't have kind of bars on that.
Okay. What about the age of the adopter? Does that matter? Is there like a maximum age limit?
There's no maximum age limit. The minimum would be 18, but there's no upper limit. We consider, people from a variety of age groups, but in saying that, during assessment, what we would look at is someone's ability to care for a child into their adulthood. So for applicants who may be at the older end of the scale, we may then match them with children that are slightly older, so that they can then parent that child into their adulthood.
Okay. And does it matter? I know we talked about it not mattering if the age or the sex of the person that wants to adopt. What about transracial adoption? Is that possible?
Transracial adoption is something that is possible, but only if the applicant, has experience of the child's ethnicity and is also able to promote the child's heritage within their own network. It's really important that a child's identity is maintained. But these are factors that we'd look at in the home study. And our aim is always to be child focused, really, and to place children in adoptive placements with those people that can meet their needs. And that's really inclusive of their cultural and racial identity.
Well said. Thank you for sharing that. Because oftentimes I've heard, even maybe watching movies or listening to sessions where people have highlighted the difficulty sometimes not understanding different ethnic backgrounds and not being able to support the child while growing to ensure that they are getting access to the ethnic backgrounds as well while they're growing up. So I think it's great. Go ahead.
No, it's such a complex issue, I think. And I think people with the best will in the world, want to adopt children outside of their race. We know that there's more children of BME heritage that are available for adoption than there are, say, white British children. And I think people, want to help and want to be able to do that, which is lovely. But what we know about children, and particularly my role in birth records counselling, actually, is that children that are in placements where their racial identity isn't kind of reflected from their parentage do struggle with identity issues later in life. So it's really important for that child as they grow and develop, especially in those difficult years. Adolescence is extremely difficult for an adopted child as it is, let alone an adopted child who feels different also because their parents may not reflect who they are culturally. Things like a lived experience of racism, being able to empathise is great, but a lived experience of that, is a lot more beneficial for a child in terms of feeling like they fit, feeling like they're understood, and feeling like they're heard. So yeah, we put great focus on matching children with the right parents.
Thank you. Very important for people to know that, just in case they're wondering about that as well. And what are some of the challenges that you face in terms of society's understanding of adoption?
So I guess there's many kind of misconceptions about adoption, and those include things like the need to be married. For example, you don't need to be married, you can be a single applicant, you can be cohabiting. I guess other things are that adoption takes years. I mean, it is a long process from start to finish, from the point in which you would inquire about adoption to the point in which an adoption order is made. Can take sort of up to a year, 18 months, but it doesn't take years and years and years to adopt by any means. That you need to be rich. You don't need to be rich to adopt. That you can demonstrate that you can live within your means, really, and afford to care for a child. And I think those are the kind of main misconceptions. That adoption is, like I said earlier, I think very intrusive and very challenging. But our aim is not to pry into the lives of people, but to make a thorough assessment of their experiences and situations, again, so that we can match them with the right children and children that are best suited to them.
Thank you. And, of course, you mentioned quite a few misconceptions that we have in different societies globally about adoption. So what, in your opinion, can we all do to raise awareness and support for adoptees and adopters as well?
I think keep talking about it, really, and spreading the word. I think doing lots of research, joining any groups that are adoption kind of focused, taking part in events that raise awareness, such as marketing events. In the UK, we have National Adoption Week, which PACT is involved in every year. And just kind of reading up and knowing, upskilling yourself, knowing as much about it as you can, particularly around the needs of vulnerable children in the looked after system, and how we kind of parent those children. We use a technique called therapeutic parenting. So I would really kind of research those sorts of things to best prepare and find out more about it.
Definitely, we all need to educate ourselves much better and just be aware, as you've mentioned. And for anyone listening and wanting to contact yourself or go through PACT, what's the best way to reach you?
If they contact our inquiries team, they can point them in the direction of where they need to go. For example, you can attend an information event. You could speak to a social worker directly if you've got kind of personal things that you want to discuss. We have question and answer sessions. We've got PACT's website's amazing with lots of kind of resources. Our Adopter Hub is phenomenal. We have lots of training, lots of webinars available for people who want to adopt. So yeah, in the first instance, contact our inquiries team and find out more about us.
Okay, so then Instagram or your website then?
It's on the PACT.
Okay.
Yeah, on the PACT website, yeah.
Yeah, the website is actually amazing because I've actually watched quite a few videos on there as well. And they're really, really great.
And we're always updating.
Sorry?
We're always updating it as well. We're always kind of, as research develops, PACT develop, we're never stagnant. We're always kind of, keeping up with the latest research, the latest training, to really upskill our adopters and our social workers.
Great. Thank you for educating us on that as well. And before we wrap up, is there anything else that you wish that people would know about the adoption process and your agency, PACT?
I would just say that adoption, it really is a truly amazing thing to do, actually. Our social workers guide you through the process as you go along. So you're never alone, you're never without support. And just being able to provide a home for a child who's experienced a really, really challenging start in life is one of the most rewarding things you can do. I'd say that all children need love and nurture and stability and consistent care. So if that's something you think that you could do and you're able to provide that, then please jump on board and join our PACT family.
Well said, Nadine. Thank you so much for coming on the show today to share all about PACT, but also educate us about adoption and the process. It's been a real insightful and informative session, and definitely look forward to having you again in the near future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll have all your details as well in the show notes, so that way anyone that wants to reach out will be able to reach out to PACT.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Fertility Conversations podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram at Fertility Conversations. If there are any topics you would like to have discussed, please send an email to fertilityconversations@gmail.com. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. Thank you again for listening. Take care of yourself and do stay hopeful.